Welcome back to another Cerebral Solo. And with this Cerebral Solo, I kind of realized I never really talked about, what it was like for me growing up in a single parent household and and stuff like that. So I kind of want to, talk about what it was like for me growing up in a single parent household and, having a having to deal with both parents not being in the house. And I know with And I was really kind of nervous with kind of making this because I know there might be some people that might watch this and kind of disagree. But I'm just telling my perspective on the thing, which is all I can really do. I can just tell my perspective and stuff like that. How it's affected me and everything. So for me, growing up in a single parent household with my mom, it like I always say in my interviews, it was pretty normal, like the normal kid thing and stuff like that. But there were times where I would kind of see people with both of their parents, and I would kind of look at it and I would be like, well, why do my parents have to be separated? Why do their parents get to be the best? Why does this person get to have both of their parents? Why can't I have both of mine? Why can't both of mine get along and you know not have arguments every time they talk over the phone and stuff like that? So that stuff kind of crept into my mind when I was younger. And growing up, you kind of wish you had both parents because there's certain things you don't want to talk about with your mom, and then for people that only have their dad in the household, there's only certain things you don't want to talk about with your dad, and you want to kind of bounce between both of the parents when certain things are going on. But for me, it was just me, my mom, and my grandparents. And whenever I would go back to Chicago, I'd visit my dad for a couple days, and it'd be like that. And when I moved back to Chicago when I was 7, we lived there for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. I got to see him more on a regular basis, but it wasn't the same. It's not the same as having him directly in the house and constantly being there. Now I'm not saying that he like my parents were wrong for doing certain things. They were doing the best that they could. My mom was doing the best she could, but what she was dealing with, my dad was dealing with whatever he was dealing with at the time. So I don't really understand the specifics and stuff like that, and I'm not gonna get into that because that's their business and stuff like that. All I can say is what I kind of dealt with. And it wasn't until but other than that, growing up was pretty normal. I had friends. I grew up doing regular kid stuff and all that stuff. And I want to say around by the time I was like 12, 13, and I had my leg surgery, that's when I definitively want to say that's when I started having more of a consistent relationship with my dad. We would talk. He would call me every day, check on me, asking me how rehab was going, making sure I was doing things and stuff like that, and all that stuff. And I was able to spend an entire summer with him at one point, and that was like from like 13, 14-year-old me, that was like the greatest thing ever because I got to consistently, I got to see my dad on a regular basis, and I got to see how he lives, see how he runs his household and stuff like that. And just to and yeah, he's and see how he lives with his, and get to see how he lives with his now wife, and how their relationship is. And it made me it made me happy to see that, because I got to see what it was like to live in a two-parent household, even though my stepmom isn't my biological mom. It's cool to have two. It's cool. It was cool to see two parents in the household and stuff like that. So for me, it was something that from a young age I always said, when I eventually have kids, that's something I want my kid to experience. I want my kid to experience two parents in the household, a happy family, and all that sort of stuff, as cheesy as it may be. And especially now, I'm glad that me and my dad have such a close relationship now, because even though he wasn't there, I mean, he was there, but for people who know what I'm trying to say, you understand. But I'm glad that I have him now as a constant, because he can show me what it's like to be an adult, and how how a man should handle certain things. Granted, there's stuff that I'm pretty sure there's stuff that he's done in his past that he's not really proud of, but he can tell, we can have those adult conversations, and he can tell me, okay, this is what you shouldn't do, this is what I did, and this is how you make sure that this doesn't happen, X, Y, and Z, and all this other stuff. So I'm really, really glad to, have my dad my dad in my life, especially during my adult years, for him to kind of, walk me through being an adult. Because one thing I was thinking about earlier before I decided to make this video, it's really difficult for parents to kind of raise teenagers, because depending on when you have kids, and you know by the time your kid's a teenager, it's hard to relate, because when you were a teenager, back in a different time. So it's kind of sort of, at least from my perspective, how I see it, it's difficult to raise teenagers, because you were a teenager in a different time, they're growing up in a different era, they have other things they have to deal with. Whereas it's easier to kind of, speak to them as adults, because you're already an adult. They're just coming into an adulthood, or starting to figure out what adult stuff is. Now it's easier to kind of give them advice and move forward. Not to say that you shouldn't give them advice as teens and stuff, because you want to help them be professional adults, and just be overall just good citizens. But I feel like it's easier for parents to talk to their kids when they're like going into their early adult years, because they can relate to being 21, being 22, and going through all these pitfalls as an early adult, as an adult in their mid-20s, because adults deal with a lot of the same things. Well, not necessarily a lot of the same things, but it's easier to relate to. But it's easier to kind of draw on that experience as an adult than it is to have to go back to speaking in terms of teenagers, because even though teenagers get into a lot of the same stuff, it was in a different time period and a different era, so it's kind of hard for the lanes to kind of correlate, if that makes any sense. So that's one thing I say all that to say that I'm glad I have as great as a relationship with my dad now as an adult, because he can kind of tell me where he messed up, and what things not to do and what things to do. And not to say that my mom didn't do a great job. I feel like my mom did a great job raising me from the time I was born up till now, and she's still doing the best, that she can, and she still tries to give me nuggets of wisdom every now and then, and even though even though sometimes, because still living at home with my grandma and my mom, it gets a little grating sometimes, because I have to see them every day, and there's times where I don't want to, listen. But I'm really, really grateful to have them in my life, and the experiences that I've gone through, I wouldn't have been able to I wouldn't have been able to get through without her and without my grandmother. And like even some of the stuff that I've gone through recently, I wouldn't have been able to get through, without my dad's advice, without my stepmom's advice, and all this other sort of stuff. So, yeah, that's what it was like, for me growing up in a single parent household, and a little bit about my parents and stuff like that. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys took something and learned something from this, and I hope you guys learned something about me today. But I'll be back for the next one soon.